Yo, what's going on, everybody? That's right. We are checking in here this Saturday evening and wanted to, go into this little topic. Um, we had, of course, a fight that happened over in Japan earlier today that involved Gennady Golovkin and Ryota Murata. Was over in Japan, and it involved, two major belts in the middleweight division. And for some that were able to catch it live, you saw that Gennady Golovkin ended up with the victory through TKO in the ninth round. So he has the unified titles there with the WBA and the IBF. He held the IBF going into this fight and acquired the WBA belt there from Ryota Murata. And, of course, the news that had been circulating over the previous couple of months is that, Golovkin is involved in a deal where he would end up facing Canelo Alvarez in September of this year, provided that both fighters won their bouts. And so here, Golovkin, uh, won here. So we're waiting on Canelo Alvarez. And so now we have that particular fight coming up in September. But wanted to raise up this particular statement that was made by one young brother here. Posted on social media in reference to Gennady Golovkin, and pretty much said that Gennady Golovkin could be viewed as the best middleweight ever. We'll see about that. Right now, we're gonna see if we can add this person on here to talk about this in a little bit more depth. C Dub in the building. What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on, Junior? How's things, man?
Oh, things are all well, man. Things are all well. Catching the boxing action today. Had, of course, this event early today. We got more action tonight. Looking forward to that. But you know, trying to get into this discussion here a little bit. So going to what you brought up earlier today after the fight between Gennady Golovkin and Ryota Murata.
Yeah, sorry about that. My kids have just just walked downstairs. One of the kids in the Matthew, go upstairs. Yeah, talking about that today, and a lot of the people know me as a big Triple G fan, which I am. Yes, I saw the fight tonight. Triple G. He looked up. Well, to you guys in the morning. It was the afternoon for us. You
Hmm.
guys about 5, 6 hours behind us, but. Yeah, Triple G watching it. I don't know if you saw the fight throughout it, but how I broke it down was as this: the first 2 rounds, Triple G won. Third round, Murata came on to Triple G, and at that point, I was like, "Wow, Triple G looking old, real old." Murata taking him out, and I thought, "Ooh, this could be tasty." Um, And Murata being 36, is he? Is Murata 36, 35, 36?
I think he's around 35. I'll verify here in a bit. He's 36.
36. I thought, well, he's going against a guy that's only a few years older, but he's struggling. He was struggling in that third round. But after that third round, he came back and he showed his class. He showed his class, real class. Because let's get it straight. I mean, he's 40 now. Triple G is 40, right? So he's out of his prime 6, 7 years. 6, 7 years. Triple G's best was probably what 2015, 16. I'd argue when he's up beating Stevens and Gabe Rosado and other fighters like that. But for me, with Triple G at 40 years old, just showed when he was going against it, and tonight again, today against the again a fighter like Murata that isn't the best, probably a C level fighter, but at 40 years old, he came back and showed how good he is. Because when you're that old and slow, it goes to show when you come to it how great of a technique you have. And Triple G showed that. Triple G showed how great of a technique he has. And the thing is, and you know, Junior, what pissed me off about people is said that Triple G, oh, he's slow, he's got no footwork, and this like. Triple G has got amazing footwork, by the way. Amazing footwork. Amazing. And do you know the best thing about Triple G? What he's got? The ability to read distance. To read distance. I've never seen a fighter read distance like he has done. And yes, this fight doesn't show how great he was, but at 40 years old, amazing, man. Real amazing. And you can take all the fight. And the thing is, right, this is what pisses me off. This is what really annoys me about everything when people talk about Triple G and his resume. Yes, his resume is brilliant. Who was he supposed to fight when he was in his prime that he didn't fight? Just argue me. Tell me that. Tell me
Okay,
that.
okay. So we're gonna go into that here with Gennady Golovkin. We're gonna go through his. You know, you talk about his career and his resume, right?
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
at first, when he pretty much acquired the middleweight titles, those were pretty much like vacant titles, so to speak, that he was able to acquire to a certain extent. Okay, he fought what was it, Nelson Tapia, right?
Mm.
And also he had a battle with, I think it was, for this IBO title, it was Juan Simon, right? So he had that WBA title and the IBO title, for a good little while.
Mm.
While that was happening, you had guys like Little Chavez, as I call him, Julio Cesar Chavez. You
Yep.
also had Sergio Martinez there.
Yep.
So you had those two guys, and then also with the WBO, you had at one particular point you had Dmitry Pirog going up against Daniel Jacobs, where Dmitry Pirog was able to get the victory there over Daniel Jacobs, by KO. And so Dmitry Pirog held the WBO title. Now, when he held the WBO title, that's when Gennady Golovkin had two of those belts, but he was going into a transition phase as far as like getting from where he was at that particular time with promotional companies over to K2, right?
Yep.
So when he was over in K2, people were seeing trying to look for him to go up against higher echelon fighters there in the middleweight division. Now, of
Yep.
course, one of them was Dimitri Pirog. And that particular fight, it took, a good little while for that fight to try to materialize. But by the time
Yep.
it did materialize, then Dimitri Pirog ended up having that, bad accident and, couldn't really fight again. So
Yep.
that particular route was out, right?
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
you had the other thing there with first, in reference to the WBC, you had the thing where you had Little Chavez, as I call him, and you had Sergio Martinez, right?
Yep. Yep.
And Sergio Martinez, of course, had defended that belt for a while, then had to fight against Little Chavez, right? It was a pretty good fight for some. For me, I thought it was more of like Sergio Martinez doing a whole lot before suffering a knockdown in that particular fight. So Sergio Martinez was able to win that bout. And then we had a few more title defenses there before ending up facing Miguel Cotto for that WBC belt, and Miguel Cotto
Okay.
ended up
Yep.
beating Sergio Martinez. So Miguel Cotto, ended up winning that belt, right? Now,
Yep.
while that was happening, you still had Gennady Golovkin, still like winning fights against the likes of Nobuhiro Ishida, Curtis Stevens, Adama Osamanu, Daniel Gill. Of course, he scored the thing there with Matthew Macklin. Right now,
Which were good wins, by the way. Good wins, by the way.
a couple of them are Macklin, yes. Stevens, maybe. Osamano, okay. Daniel Gill, okay. Yeah, Daniel Gill, right? Now, he has the fight against Marco Antonio Rubio in 2014. This is about the same time that, they're having a thing there with the WBC belt. Now,
Okay.
he fought Rubio. He was already, a world champion, and he
Yeah,
fought
it
Rubio for the interim title. Now, at that particular instance, there has been no point in history, as far as I know, where a fighter that was a current world champion was able to fight somebody else for a mandatory position for another title.
right.
Never seen that. Never has never
Okay.
happened. Okay. Now, at that particular juncture, it looked like they were trying to make a move towards either Golovkin fighting Cotto, or as it ended up being, Canelo. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So cool. Now,
Y-
he has that. He has that fight. Of course, Rubio misses weight and all that.
Yep.
Golovkin ends up winning. He's the interim titleist. So after that, he has his fights in 2015, and there were, in 2015, you had the whole thing with, like I said, you had Sergio Martinez with the WBC belt. Then it went over to Miguel Cotto, right? So Miguel
Yep.
Cotto had that. And then you still had the situation with the WBO where I think at that particular time, around 2014, 2015, you had Andy Lee and should be Peter Quillen, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
they
Yep. Yep. Quillen.
were draw,
Yep. 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 Go on.
right? And actually around that time too, there was a part where Gennady Golovkin would have been facing Andy Lee, but that fight had been canceled because of the situation there with Gennady Golovkin. I don't know why it wasn't ever revisited at that point, but that's another thing. Now, still in 2015, you had that draw between Peter Quillen and Andy Lee. The IBF title at that particular time was vacant, and David Lemieux fought Hassan Ndam for the vacant belt, where David Lemieux ended up winning. So at
Yeah.
that particular juncture, you had Golovkin where he could have faced, or he could have revisited the thing with Andy Lee, or faced David Lemieux. You know what I'm saying? It ended up being David Lemieux, Madison Square Garden, unification bout. Okay, so he defeats David Lemieux. So he has another one of those major titles. Okay, you still had the WBO out there, Andy Lee, but later in the year, Andy Lee ended up facing Billy Joe Saunders and losing to Billy Joe Saunders. So Billy Joe Saunders had the WBO title, and then you had the fight with Miguel Cotto and Canelo Alvarez for the WBC title, where Canelo
Yep.
ended up winning the WBC. So then you go
Yep.
into that next year, 2016, and in that particular juncture, that's where the thing for that WBC interim title thing came up with Golovkin. And so it's like, oh, now he, wants to say, hey, I'm, with champion. I got the WBA, I got the IBF, I got WBC interim, and I want to see if I can go for the WBC title. Now, Canelo's like, man, what did you do in order to get to this particular position? Well, we know, because uh, he fought the thing for the who was I talking about? Like Canelo fought Cotto, won the
WC.
WBC middleweight title.
WC. Yep.
Golovkin, of course, he won the interim belt through fighting Rubio, who missed weight. Okay, they went for the whole thing to try to negotiate, and Canelo says, "Hey, I went up, I fought Cotto, I beat Cotto, and all of that." And even with that, just to go back to that particular fight real quick, right?
Yep.
Before
Yep.
that
Okay.
particular
Okay.
Cotto was supposed to pay off, for step aside. Well, he did pay off for step aside, but he also had to pay an additional fee. And he's like, man, I ain't doing that. I'm gonna just fight Canelo. You can do the step aside, but as far as like this other stuff, nah, I ain't doing it. So if Cotto would have beat Canelo, the WBC title would have been vacant, but Canelo won. So there it is. Now, you know what the WBC mandatory rules or mandatory splits is 55%, 45%. So with Canelo trying to go into negotiations with Golovkin and having to win, and now Canelo's just at that point where he's the top guy in boxing, right?
Yeah, the top guy. Yeah, yeah,
So so now he's like, I'm the top guy in boxing, and I see this guy Golovkin, and I see, what he's been doing. I see who he's faced, and I'm like, why should he get this percentage or this amount of the purse going up against me? So
yeah.
he's like, nah, he ain't getting that percentage. Hey, I'm Canelo. You're nobody. I'm Canelo. You want the belt? Go ahead and have it. You wanna ask for that amount of money when you haven't really done much to deserve that? You know what? I'm good. You can go ahead and have the WBC belt. So now Golovkin has the WBC belt, three of the four major titles, one more title left, WBO. Does he go for it? No, no, not necessarily. He ends up facing Kell Brook. Of course, Kell Brook, we know, came up from 147. He's Kell Brook. And then you go into
It was just to interject there. It was supposed to be Chris Eubank. That was supposed to be the fight. It never happened. That's where Kilbuck came in.
well, that's a whole debate. A lot of stories
It
have
was,
been
yeah, it
said.
was, it was, it was, it was. But anyway,
So
yeah, it's
so
irrelevant. But yeah, go on, go on. By the way, Junior, I'm sat here like this. Yeah, I'm supposed to be debating you, and I'm now. Carry on. I'm loving it. You carry on, man. I'm loving what you're saying. Go
so
on.
I'm continuing this thing here, right? Now, fights Brook gets the stoppage. Three of the four major titles. One more title
Mhm.
left. Um doesn't, necessarily get that. Um he has the fight with Daniel Jacobs. Of course, for those who've been following, Daniel Jacobs was the interim champ or the regular champ, where he wasn't a mandatory, whatever it was, right? And they went through the whole thing with negotiations back and forth. But for me, I'm like, why wasn't there any negotiations for a fight with Billy Joe Saunders at that time? But that's a whole nother story because even
Yep.
before the Brook
It
fight,
was. Yep.
well before the Brook fight, actually, at the beginning of that year, there was an offer to Billy Joe Saunders, but that was like
There they
4 months.
were. Yep.
And after that, I ain't really hear anything. So you go into that next year, 2017, I think it was, and then you have the fight against Daniel Jacobs. All right, and then after
It was a
that,
good fight, by the way. It was a good
it was,
fight between Triple G and GX. Really
then
good.
you have that.
Really
Now
good.
you have the situation where Golden Boy Promotions and Canelo, pretty much like say, yo, I'm the number one man. You want to face me? This is what you got to do. And around the same time, you had the whole thing with Billy Joe Saunders saying, "Hey, man, I got the WBO belt. What's up?" You know. Um, but we knew at that particular time the the uh, the objective was to have that fight against Canelo Alvarez. First fight against Canelo Alvarez, back and forth fight. Uh, me, it was a tale of two halves. People could say someone, Golovkin could have won 7-5, Canelo could have won 7-5, or it could have been a 6-6 draw. So that's the first fight. Okay, you go forward. They're supposed to have an immediate rematch. The whole thing with Canelo and the beef happens, and then Golovkin had three potential opponents. One was Jaime Munguia, wasn't approved. One was Demetrius Andrade, who ended up having the belt. I think another one was at one point Derevianchenko, but ended up being Veins Martirosyan because it was something they wanted to have a fight for Golovkin. at that particular date. They wanted to lock in that date, so they had it against Bane Marderosian over in California. So there's that. Now you go into the second fight with Canelo Alvarez. And there, once again, Canelo Alvarez says, man, listen, what have you really done to say that you deserve this specific amount of purse? And it went into the 11th hour for them to make that deal for the second fight. And for
Yep.
those who followed it, Canelo was just so pissed off about that he wanted to go ahead, get this fight
What
over with.
in the second fight?
In the second fight, he wanted to go
Yep.
with the second fight, get this second fight over with, and just be done with Gennady Golovkin. So,
Yep.
that goes ahead and that happens, 17 or whatnot, and or 2018, excuse me, and
20. Yep.
yeah, 2018, September 2018, and Canelo wins by majority decision. Okay, so that
Split
fight
decision.
happens HBO pay per view, and then not soon after that, that's the end of HBO as far as boxing is concerned. They said screw it.
Split decision.
It was actually majority. It wasn't split. It was majority actually. Um,
Was it?
yeah, yep. 114. Glenn Feldman 114, and Dave Moretti and Steve Weisfeld scored at 115, 113 for Canelo Alvarez. And so you go into the thing there. Of course, end of HBO. Got to figure out where Golovkin is going to be. Canelo, of course, signed that deal with DAZN at that particular time. And then Golovkin pretty much followed up with the deal with DAZN of his own. Okay. Has his fight coming back. And it's, a shade over, 160 pounds against Steve Rose. Okay. Then after that, he faces Sergey Derevianchenko for the vacant IBF and IBO middleweight championship. I thought Derevianchenko was working him. Uh, but ended up being a unanimous decision win for Gennady Golovkin. Then after
Yeah,
that,
they're not. I think the knockdown won him that fight.
that,
The knockdown in
that was
the
the first
second, was
round.
it? Second, first
First
round?
round.
First
First
round.
round.
Yeah.
And then after that, he has his fight against Camille Cesaro-Meta, who was the IBF mandatory at that particular time. Don't ask me how he was mandatory, but he was. Ends up, stopping Cesaro-Meta. And then, of course, now fast forward to, earlier today against Ryota
Yep.
Murata, who held the WBA version of the middleweight title, and he stops Murata in 9 rounds. So,
Yep.
so now it's about, okay, what is Golovkin's place in history in the middleweight division? And looking over that career and seeing who was there before him, I'm not seeing him up there, man. I'm not. I got a few guys that I would put over Golovkin, over the course of their careers. And this is, not necessarily guys that, I'm not even going like all the way back to, before the 50s or whatever it is. I'm talking about, well, it could be before the 50s when some of them started their careers, but, going into the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and up to the 2000s, there have been a few guys in the middleweight division that I would put over Gennady Golovkin at this particular instance. This includes, of course, the marvelous one, Marvin Hagler. Rest in power to
I get
Marvin
that.
Hagler.
Yep.
You
One.
know,
Yeah, I'll give you that. Go on.
of course, the other one is who everyone considers as either the best pound for pound fighter ever or the best fighter ever, Sugar Ray Robinson. Okay, so there's him. Another one I put up there, the Argentinian Carlos Monzon. It's another one. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And another one that I put above him is the most modern of the group, and that's the executioner, Bernard Hopkins. Now, you could possibly put the likes of Beaver Griffith above him or Jake LaMotta, but Jake LaMotta is like, he had a majority of his career before, the 1950s. So you may or may not, put him on there. But Emil Griffith, yeah, I put him over Gennady
Okay.
Golovkin. And yes, I put Bernard Hopkins over Gennady Golovkin. Okay.
Mm,
Now, C Dub,
mm.
what do you say about who I named on that list?
Well, to be honest, I've just got to say to you, Junior, that's an amazing thing that you just said. You just done. Your introduction to everything there been brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. What you just said, I don't, I don't know what to say now because how you just put that is absolutely articulate. Everything else that you just said, amazing, and that's why you are a top boxing pundit right now, and you deserve the level. And people should push on this page. Everyone support this page because Junior is a very clever individual and loves his boxing and arguably knows more than everybody else around in these groups. But yeah, going over that, Junior, what I would say with what you just said, Triple G, right? Thing with it is people assume with Triple G that he is slow, doesn't have the footwork, doesn't have this, doesn't have that. As a shit resume. Right. Well, let's take it back to the resume situation, right? He beat up everybody that he could have done at 160. He had nobody else to take. He wanted, like you said, the Argentinian kid, Martinez, even Cotto, the rest of them. And none of them wanted that smoke. And there was nobody else for him to take. So that's when he was beating Daniel Gill, Gabe Rosado, and the rest. And it's difficult because when people come in with Triple G and say he's never beaten anybody, it's like who would he actually beat? So then when he fights fast forward and fights with Canelo, and let's go against with the Canelo fight, the first fight, and even the second fight. For me, he won it. Um, he won both. Even to the point, Junior, where I've still got screenshots with the bookies over here, where Triple G was 16-1 on in the 11th round against Canelo in that second fight, where even the bookies thought, and you know the bookies never get it wrong. It was like Triple G won that fight. You know, he won that fight. Um, and it was tough to take that loss. And as a big fan, it was tough to take that loss as well. You know, and Canelo, what he is, a great, fantastic fighter, very good fighter. But Triple G is different in the sense that, you know, when you see him fight, right, like I said before, you know, he people, like, let me just ask you this, Junior. When people say about footwork, how great footwork is, you've got to be quick and skillful. How great is Triple G's footwork? Let me ask you that.
Um, I don't really necessarily like kind of like bring up his footwork in a sense that I think he kind of like for the majority of his career during his prime, he was more of that technical try to be a precision fighter, you know. Um some people probably say that he had one of the better jabs in the game because
Yes, it is.
it
Yeah.
was sharp, precise, and was forceful. And in a sense, that kind of like set other things up for him to methodically break down most of his opponents. As far as like footwork is concerned, that's more of like a strategic thing. There, like you don't necessarily see him being like, of course, like being fast on his feet, but he would be, in a way calculated in where he moves, so that where if he sees where his opponent is going, he could get to a point where he would set his opponent up to having one of the big shots
Reading distance. Yeah,
or
reading distance. Yep.
not being able to get away if they were in the ropes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
in that particular sense, he had that background coming from Kazakhstan and the amateur career coming up and building himself up during that particular time that made him have all of those fundamentals before he got in there as a pro. So as far as like footwork is concerned, it's more of like where he was very strategic in his footwork, but it also gotten to the point where he was very sharp in what he was doing with his punches, and also as far as like trying to take a lot of the punches that were coming to him. So a lot of the opponents that he had coming up really couldn't affect him or phase him. So he had that, not only that so-called skill level or whatever it is, but he also had the confidence that he could just go ahead and walk down most of his opponents. So that's pretty much like,
Yeah, I get
what
that.
in the majority of his career. One other thing that I thought you would have brought up with Golovkin during his career was that, while he was there with the belts, he had the WBA title for a long time, but there was still a WBA super champion, and that was Felix Sturm.
In who?
Felix Sturm was there with the WBA super title,
He tried to
where
get that fight. He did try to get a fight. Yep, go
so
on.
so at least with that particular instance, then yeah, he couldn't get that fight with Felix Sturm in order to become the super champion. So it just ended up to where Sturm
He's a
fought
German Felix.
Daniel
Yeah.
Gill, lost to Daniel Gill, and then Daniel Gill lost like a lot of Golovkin. So that's how that worked. Um, but one of the other things that I kind of like was there for Golovkin was, as far as like a critique, was that for the time that he was there at middleweight, he had never fought for the WBO title. There was only like that one instance when they tried to have the
He
fight against
tried. He did try. He
Pirog,
did try. He did try, Junior. He did
Dimitri
try. He tried it all.
with one with Dimitri Pirog, but that was out.
Yep.
After that, he had the opportunity with Andy Lee or
Which he
Peter
tried.
Quillen.
He tried. Yep.
Well, Andy Lee, that thing got canceled. Um, you had Peter Quillen, you had Billy Joe Saunders, and you had Demetrius Andrade. You know, and particularly with the Saunders, there was only that one attempt where the one offer in 2016. After that, wasn't like revisited, and then when Demetrius Andrade got the vacant WBO title after defeating Walter Cox and Dakwa, he tried to
Yep.
see if he could get a fight with Gennady Golovkin. Of
Yep.
course, he went to the zone. He tried to get the fight on the zone. It never,
He
never
did.
materialized. You know,
He did.
I, huh?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, go on. Go on.
Wait, hold on. You said he did what? Who did?
You can.
No, I was saying in reference to a potential matchup between Demetrius Andrade and Gennady Golovkin. Never really materialized. Never really happened. Um,
And to
and
be honest, with that, with Boo Boo, by the way, how highly do you rate Boo Boo? I mean, I rate Boo Boo really good, but let's be honest, if Boo Boo came, I mean, it's kind of tough now because Triple G being 40 and everything else. Boo Boo was really skilled fighter, by the way, real skilled, real skilled, and to the point where I think he could put it on the likes of Canelo and even the Big Charlo. But you're going against now, and again, by the way, just take it for that people now saying that Boo Woo should fight Triple G. Well, Triple G at 40 now against Boo Boo. I think Boo Boo will probably beat personally. That's how I see it right now. And me as a big Triple G fan, I think these guys will probably beat. But If we're talking about 2, 3, 4 years ago, then no, it wouldn't have happened. Triple G, and again, what we're saying, Triple G is what? He's 7, 8 years outside of prime? 7, 8 years out of prime? Because I think that's how far out of prime he is. And for me, if we're looking about the modern day, sort of fights and everything else, with Triple G now, where does he go? I think where Triple G goes is he should retire. He should retire and let the other boys fight it out, whether that's Boo Boo, Canelo, or Charlo, whoever. But for me, from Triple G's point of view, he's done what he's done. He's been the greatest from the servant. He's been. This is the thing with Triple G, right? He's probably been the greatest servant for me personally. One of the greatest fighters I've ever seen. Exciting, amazing. For the past 10, 15 years, and I've loved everything about what he's done. I could not think of any other fighter that I've enjoyed more than Triple G. I've just loved everything that he's done. And I think now is the time, and this is where we were debating about it. I think now at 40 years old, it's time for him to call it a day, but just respect what he's done. And I think people should respect it. But the problem is, Junior, is that they don't want to, because there's too many haters out there. Because if you're a Canelo fan, a Boo Boo fan, a Charlo fan, you've got to hate Triple G. And that's wrong. Because for me, he has done what he has done. He's been amazing. Absolutely amazing. And let me just ask you, let me just put it to this. People said he never had that resume. Well, Triple G never avoided anybody. He cleaned out the division. He went after Martinez. He went after everybody else, Cotto, everybody else. He went after him. But he never had that chance. They avoided him. He beat everybody in the division that he had to fight. Whilst you've got all the fighters out there, and let's talk about 135. Well, go against it and say Tank Davis, for example. And I don't like comparing fighters, but Tank Davis. I mean, you've got fighters out there, people and fans out there saying Tank Davis this, Tank Davis. And by the way, I'm a massive Tank Davis fan. I love him. He has been avoiding everybody since the fucking day of dawn. Everybody. We know what's going on with Floyd, right? And he will continue to do that. Triple G never did that. He fought everybody that was there in the division. And there's a difference. And that's why it pisses me off with fans out there comparing fighters. So you've got Tank fans saying this, Tank fans saying, and I'm saying on Tank, but other fighters too. Triple G fought everybody that he could. Everybody. And just because they weren't the greatest doesn't mean that Triple G isn't a fucking great. Because for me, his boxing talent, skill, and everything else is phenomenal. And and for me, first ballot Hall of Fame. When I talk about the best middleweight ever, I will always say that it will be Marvin Hagler. I will always say that. I will always say that. For me, Triple G second. And you could talk about Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr. I would always put them above Triple G, but 160, no. 160 Triple G, him and Marvin Hagler, 1 and 2. That is it. And Triple G's skill set, ability to box, jab, footwork, everything else. What he did to Canelo in the first fight, and even the second fight, for me, told me, showed me how great he was. And even tonight, or this morning, against Murata. Murata, a big, strong guy. Yes, not the great, probably C+ level fighter. And at 40 years old, he, in that third round, if you watch the third round, struggling. And Triple G showed how great of a boxer he is. And what pisses me off most about this junior is about how much people hate on Triple G. And I tell you why they hate on Triple G when they say he's got enough footwork, he's slow and everything. Because they're clueless. They don't understand boxing. They do not. Because they think that you have to have footwork. If you've got footwork and you've got to have great footwork, you've got to be black and quick. If you've got great footwork, you've got to be black, quick, and
Mm,
an absolute, a quick footwork. Not. Just bear with me on this one.
okay.
But when you are something like Triple G, they think you're ponderous, slow, not good enough. There's a difference between being quick with feet, quick, and being skillful with your footwork. There's a difference, and people don't understand that. So let's just say Gary Russell Jr., right? Gary Russell Jr. has fought one fight every 3 years. Now that guy is skillful and quick footwork, quick hands, everything else. People will say he is amazing footwork, everything else quality. But yet, on the other hand, they will say Triple G has garbage footwork. Now, let's take it back to the 147 division. I'll carry on with this with the footwork thing. People will say that Bud Crawford has amazing footwork. Why? Because he's quick, skillful. Has he got amazing footwork? Earl Spence, doesn't have the quick, amazing footwork because he's a come forward fighter that likes to fucking hurt you. Now, if you watch both fighters, who would you say has the better footwork out of Spence and Bud Crawford? Now, I know, watching both fighters, who I would say has the better footwork. But it depends on how you see it. But the casuals will always look at one thing and think that that one fighter has got a better footwork, because ultimately the casuals do not understand. So going back to that with Spence and Bud Crawford, I'll tell you now, Spence has better footwork than Bud Crawford. Bud Crawford is a little bit sloppy with his footwork. He drags that back foot a little bit too much for me. That doesn't say to me that he will lose to Spence, but I'm just trying to make the point that people do not understand boxing and the skill set. Over to you.
All right. Now, a few things that you did talk about in reference to Gennady Golovkin. One, from a fan's perspective, whether it's casual fans or not, or those that follow the sport, one thing that I do see is that a lot of people do criticize Gennady Golovkin, but you wanted to kind of like veer it over to a side, something that we really don't want to discuss that much. But I'll put it to you like this, right? Even if I kind of like brought it up like that, right? Many of the
Yep.
people that I see criticize Gennady Golovkin don't criticize Alexander Usyk. They like all across the board. I've seen people love Alexander Usyk and all of the
That's true.
skills, all of the intangibles that he has, all of the elements that he has that he incorporates in the ring. Everybody loves Alexander Usyk, but the thing with
But
that
why
is
though? But
the
why
thing,
though? But why? Go.
but the thing with Alexander Usyk and Gennady Golovkin, right? Usyk and Golovkin could have the same or similar skill set. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but from a technical standpoint, they could be pretty similar. But they don't criticize Usyk because Usyk puts himself in a position to fight everybody that's available out there, no matter what the circumstances. Okay.
Triple
Now
D never did that.
we brought
Triple
up the
D never
thing
did
in
that.
reference to we brought up the thing in reference to Gennady Golovkin in his instance with um, the WBA super title. Okay. And also, well, I didn't actually bring this up, but this little Chavez, but that little Chavez thing was at 164. But I'm
We
talking
get a
about
little job. It's
Sergio
funny now.
Martinez, right?
Yep.
But like I said, when you have multiple instances where you could have fought for the WBO middleweight title, and you don't. When you have instances where you could face the likes of, and this is something that I brought up a while ago, a career-defining fight for Gennady Golovkin from a legacy standpoint didn't have to be Canelo Alvarez for a third time. It could have been against Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo. And
Yep.
neither one of those fights came up. Neither one of those fights were discussed. So, I mean, now, like you said, he is 40 years old. We've seen his fights against Sergey Derevianchenko, and you've seen this fight here against Ryota Murata, in that, people are seeing in the future him potentially facing Canelo Alvarez, and it's going to be at an elevated weight. And like I said, it's 40 years old. The mobility may not be there. Like, he could be barbecue chicken for Canelo Alvarez.
I can tell you will be now. That's me as a Triple G fan. Yep. Yep.
But as far as like what he's done as a middleweight, I just don't put it up to the same level as what Bernard Hopkins did. Even with him, he won the undisputed middleweight championship. He knocked out or stopped Oscar De La Hoya. He stopped Felix Trinidad. Among others, he should have won that first fight against Jermaine Taylor, but I'm gonna get freaking Lou DiBella for that. I should have told him that.
Lou DiBella's a prick, by my way. Yeah.
But I told he was on Chicken Talk. Shout out to Chicken Talk. He was on there earlier this week. But you have that with Bernard Hopkins. That's my modern day guy as far as like middleweight. Roy Jones wasn't really there at middleweight. He had a brief time at middleweight. He went up to super middleweight and got all his
Yep.
belts there and shot up from there. But like I said, like the likes of Carlos Monzon, Sugar Ray Robinson, like Emil Griffith, or like I said,
It's
Marvin
hard. It's hard.
Hatton.
It's,
You know,
it's hard for me to go back that far, to be honest.
Yeah, but I
The
mean that
middleweight
kind of
thing.
like tells you the thing there with the middleweight division over the like, if it wasn't the whole thing there with Bernard Hopkins, that you had Bernard Hopkins, you had Oscar De La Hoya, you had Felix Sturm, you had Felix Trinidad that it came up from 154, beat William Joppy and all that. So you had William Joppy there too. But after that, you really can't, kind of like see what the history of the middleweight division was, up until you had the likes of Sergio Martinez, who moved, came up from 154. Of course, Cotto, Canelo, all those guys came up from 154. Only Golovkin is pretty much the guy that like was there at 160, that started at 160. Everyone else came up, but that kind of like shows the depth or whatever it is with the middleweight division, but also shows like everything was so fragmented from a business perspective in the middleweight division that you couldn't have those unification fights, or not that many unification fights. Like you didn't have fights with Peter Quillen. You didn't have fights. Fast forward into now, didn't have fights with Jamal Charlo. Like he
Yeah.
didn't
All right. Yeah.
he didn't
Yeah.
fight Gennady Golovkin, but he didn't fight Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah.
He moved up from 154 to 160 and
Yeah.
specifically fought the mandatory there at 160 so he could fight Gennady. I mean, not Gennady Golovkin, but Canelo Alvarez, and it still didn't happen. So middleweight division over this past, I would say, what, 7 to 10 years, almost. Well, it's crazy because what is it? I think that was Bernard Hopkins was the last undisputed middleweight champion. You know,
Well, I mean, when we talked about all this, and I've said, by the way, Junior, by the way, with this, is that I've always had Bernard Hopkins and, which I said to you, and Roy Jones are both Triple G. I have, ultimately. They've had a better career and are above Triple G. I'm just saying about 160, just because Triple G is pure 160. That's what he's been, you know. So I was always saying that Triple G, and I've said before, Agler, Triple G, they're number one and two. when you talk about Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr., they've done it over so many divisions, going up above the weights and everything else. Which they have, light, heavy, and beyond. You know, but for me, when you're talking about 160 division, it should always come back to two men, which is Agler and Triple G. They are the best two fights, and I don't see how anyone can't say anything different. If we are talking about Roy Jones Jr., Bernard Hopkins, yes, they are better than Triple G. Of course they are. And we're talking about the top five. So the top five that I've seen are in my generation. So when you were talking about Sugar Ray Robinson, I don't play that because I'm not an history guy. Um, but if you want to put my top five, which I'll do it now, which is Floyd Mayweather, Roy Jones Jr., Bernard Hopkins, Andre Ward, and Manny Pacquiao. They're my top five. But if you're talking about the 160 division, pure 160 division, Triple G is the man, along with, um, you know, that's it. That's it.
Mm.
That's how I see it. And with Roy Jones Jr., what you said at 160, and Bernard Hopkins, not long enough for that division. They move through the weights, and it will always be above Triple G. I mean, bear in mind, Bernard Hopkins came out of prison, lost his first fight. I mean, he started fighting how old was he? About 27, something like
Yeah, around that age.
that. And by the way, if we're going to go on to Bernard Hopkins, I don't want to go away from Triple G, but by the way, Bernard Hopkins is probably arguably one of the most underrated fights I've ever seen. People don't even put him in the level of how great he is and was. I mean, this is a guy that lost his first fight, came out of prison fighting when he was 26, 27, and one of the most skillful fighters, defensive fighters. And that fight against Joe Calzaghe, by the way, which was a close fight, he lost that fight. You imagine somebody that's in his 40s losing to one of the best, sort of super middleweights around in Joe Calzaghe. Um, That's how great Bernard Hopkins was. But I'm trying to take away from Triple G. Triple G was a 160 fighter where these guys weren't. They fought through the different ways. So I'm just trying to say that Triple G was that good because he was a pure 160 fighter. Am I saying that he's better than the likes of Roy Jones Jr., Bernard Hopkins over all his career? No, I don't think he is. No. Definitely not. But at 160, I do think, other than Marvin Hagler, he's the best ever. I do. That's how I see it. And again, people said, "Who's he fought?" Well, he tried to fight everybody, even Martinez, everybody else. He tried to fight everybody that he could fight. He just, when it came to it, when the biggest fight, he got robbed in his defining fight against Canelo. Now I don't know how you see it, Junior, but he lost both fights, and I thought he won both. And that is the defining thing with Triple G, which pisses me off because he deserved to win. Certainly the first fight, the second fight was close, and he got beat. He lost those. So all the fucking haters come out and absolutely ruin Triple G because he didn't win those fights. But at the end of the day, Triple G is a great, great, fucking great fighter. Not as great as, like I just said, with the fighters we've just named, but at 160, arguably the best.
Now, compare Gennady Golovkin and his middleweight career to the other fighters that we mentioned, and you bring up the thing with Bernard Hopkins as far as like all time that you would probably put Bernard Hopkins over Gennady Golovkin, but
I would. I
just
would.
the thing with 160, you would put Gennady Golovkin over Bernard Hopkins. But
Yes.
my thing with Bernard Hopkins was he had a reign with the IBF middleweight title that lasted 20 fights. And in that process, he was able to become unified and then undisputed. middleweight champion in that particular reign.
Yeah.
Of course, he had the first opportunity for the IBF title against Roy Jones Jr. and did lose by unanimous decision, but he worked his way
And he
back.
lost badly, by the way.
Yeah,
Roy Jones battered
worked his
big
way
time.
back. Had another shot at that IBF title initially, but it ended up being a majority draw, and then fought it for it again and was able to win it, and just didn't drop it until he faced Jermaine Taylor. But in the process of that, he faced William Joppy, Robert Allen, Felix Trinidad, Keith Holmes, Antoine Eccles, Sid Vanderpool, and Oscar De La Hoya and Howard Eastman. So a good amount of people would kind of like look at that particular reign and say, oh, he also did defeat Glenn Cough Johnson too. So there's that, and John
Yeah,
David
go yeah.
Johnson too. So those two notable names are on that resume during the reign of Bernard Hopkins having that IBF middleweight title.
Yeah.
So I kind of like put that particular resume that he has over what Gennady Golovkin did over the course of his career there at middleweight. Once he, first won that WBA regular title, and then eventually, got the other belts along the way. You know what I mean? So, I kind of like would compare those two resumes back to back, and kind of like put Bernard Hopkins over that. The thing there with
I get
Sugar Ray
that.
Robinson,
I get that. I get that. I
yeah,
understand. Yeah, I get you.
and the thing there with Sugar Ray Robinson, of course, people always do that. Carlos Monzon, man, like
Again,
he
before
looks
my
like one of
time,
my
you
champs.
know, before
Um,
my time. I mean, I'm 42 right now, so before my time, really, when I was watching it,
yeah,
with Carlos
yeah. I
Monzon,
mean,
that,
Monzon is before my time too, but I know the guys, notable guys there that were middleweight over the course of the that time, not just with Marvin Hagler and who he fought and who he beat, but guys like like I said with Carlos Monzon, and they mention him because he defeated the likes of Mino Benavuti twice, Emil Griffith, Benny
Griffith,
Briscoe,
yeah, yeah.
so and also like Tony Mundine, a lot of those guys, and like his man, he had a string of, well, I wouldn't say victories, but his unbeaten streak, right? I think it was, he had an unbeaten streak from 1964 till his last fight in 1977.
Who's that?
13,
Who did? Who
13
did?
years, Carlos Monson, 13 years, going through all of the guys that he went through. Ended up with a record of 87 wins and 3 losses and 9 draws. But 87 wins with 59 of those wins by way of knockout. That's even in that particular time when they fought very often. Of course, they fight in their own country. They have a whole bunch of fights there and whatnot. That's still crazy.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah. It's a crazy record. Yeah, it
You
is.
and of course, Marvin Hagler, of course, his fights with Tommy Hearns, John Mugabe, Roberto
John
Duran,
Mugabe. Yeah, people forget that
yeah,
John Mugabe fight. Yeah.
Mustafa Hamsho, Alan Minner,
Alan Minter. Yeah, one of our
yeah,
boys.
yeah,
Yeah, Alan Minter.
yeah,
Yeah,
Benny,
yeah.
Benny Briscoe too, like a lot of these, and is it Roy Jones? Roy Jones, but it might be Roy Jones Senior. But yeah, everybody brings up Marvin Hagler. Emil Griffith is another fighter there that came up around that same time as Briscoe and Carlos Monzon and all of those guys there in the early '70s too. So that's a lot of people to kind of like bring up as far as like those that would be among the top middleweights of all time. You know, I kind of like just brought up those guys, and then like I said, you look up if y'all go into the boxing records database, of course, BoxRec, you'll see like from the point system they rank it from Sugar Ray Robinson, Carlos Monzon, Holman Williams before the 50s, Hagler. Harry Greb before the 30s.
Harry
Bernard,
Greb. Harry Greb. Fuck Harry
yep,
Greb. Yeah. Yeah, go.
Harry Greb, Bernard Hopkins, Emil Griffith, Charlie Burley before the 50s again, Mike Gibbons, of course, before the 50s,
50s, yeah.
Jake LaMotta, of course, Jake LaMotta, uh,
60s, yeah. 70s, yeah.
yeah, 50. Lloyd Marshall, I think a good number of people won't, know much about that. Gene Fomer, of course, notable. Dick Tiger, Bobo Olsen, a couple of other people that are notable around that time of, like Ray Robinson and those. And then it's Gennady Golovkin, who's a little bit a shade over Nino Benavuti, who I mentioned it was, one of those guys that, Carlos Monzon and other guys within the 60s and 70s that fought. So you have Gennady Golovkin there, I guess, a little bit outside of the top 10 overall when it comes to middleweights of all time, But as far as like, modern times, yeah, you could, put them in there within the top 10, maybe top five for, some. But, if I put in, Hagler, if I put in, Bernard Hopkins, some may put Ray Robinson, but Ray Robinson wouldn't, necessarily be like modern, or maybe even Carlos Monzon might not even be modern. But yeah, you would have to put in Gennady Golovkin in there as far as like middleweights for modern history, because you know outside of Bernard Hopkins, you really haven't seen like that many fighters that were out there that really had an established career in the middleweight division that long. You know,
Well,
you
that's,
say
yeah,
that
you're
about
right.
can't say
Yeah.
that about Oscar De La Hoya. You can't, necessarily say that about, you know, who was it? Sergio Martinez. He came up from 154, 160, and then, he ballooned up. He's still fighting, you know. Can't say that about Little Chavez. And, a few of those other guys, that, have been part of the modern day middleweight division and competing there at the middleweight division. So for some, you could put Golovkin up there in their rankings for modern day middleweights. But as far as like all time, I can't do it. I can't quite
Well,
do
it's
it.
tough. I mean, you say
But
all the time, like I said, yeah, go.
here's one thing for you. How about this? Gennady Golovkin, in his reign at middleweight, is viewed in a similar way as Vladimir Klitschko was at heavyweight.
Yeah, I get that. Yep, yep.
You know, people could say that Golovkin, dominated in the middleweight division for an extended period of time, but we didn't necessarily have that defining win that kind of like stands out in his
Yeah.
resume for some.
And
And
that
then
that's the
same
thing that,
people
yeah,
could
that's the
say
thing
that
that
about
is,
Vladimir
Roger.
Klitschko in
Yep.
his reign in the heavyweight division. So you could have that type of comparison.
Yeah.
You know,
But I mean, the thing is with resumes and who you fought. I mean, let's go back to Roy Jones Jr. I mean, Roy Jones has not the greatest wins ever, on his resume. Probably what Bernard Hopkins. Who else? But for me, Roy Jones was arguably the. For me, Roy Jones Jr. is the best ever. Best ever. But resume wise, Bernard Hopkins and a few others, and that's it. But people will always go about resumes and hate on
yeah,
that. Triple G similar, and resumes. Resume is what it is.
hmm
Have you got the fighters that are out there that you could take on and beat? You know, and with boxing, especially now, it is what it is. It is what it is. People avoiding each other, and that's what it is. But we've got to look at it and think. Yes, resume is one thing, but how good were they as a fighter? Triple E is one of those fighters. Same as same as Roy Jones Jr.
yeah. I think who is it? Enzo Macinarelli, or it's some of those other guys. Van
Enzo
Aki. No, it's
McNally.
Van
Enzo
Aki.
McNally.
Yeah, Sven Aki was one guy that was there around that I think was super middleweight division or something like that for a while. That Roy Jones wasn't able to fight. Um, but I don't. In that particular instance, Roy Jones' resume is pretty much similar to Golovkin and Vladimir
Yeah,
Klitschko in that
yeah, it
he
is.
was at that particular instance so much better than those opponents that he really didn't have that type of fight that kind of like defined himself. Even with him going up to heavyweight and fighting John Ruiz, I think to a certain extent, people kind of like felt like he would be able to defeat a John Ruiz. So he would have tried to have another one of those career defining fights at heavyweight, whether it could have been against Lennox Lewis or against Evander Holyfield,
Yeah,
or which could have happened and probably should have happened against Mike Tyson at that particular
yeah.
time. That should have been his career defining fight, you know. But he felt like he wanted a little bit more money at the time, so they were like had to
Which it happens. Which it happens.
yeah.
It happens.
So there's that, man. But I mean, my thing there with Golovkin, man. People will, as one person on Twitter said earlier today, he is one of the more polarizing fighters that's out there.
Yeah,
With
yeah, that's true. That is true. That
But
is true.
for me over the course of time, covering as the boxing source, I have been, claimed as the biggest Deontay Wilder hater in the planet, but that's not necessarily true. I've been much more of a critic of
And
Gennady Golovkin.
you know I loved Deontay Wilder, by the way. And I know a lot how much you love Anthony Joshua. But there you go.
But I've been much more of a critic of Gennady Golovkin over the course of his professional career in comparison to Deontay Wilder. But it goes more into the whole thing with the resume standpoint. I really don't, talk about him from a skill set standpoint. Like you were saying, like you see, people talking about, oh, Golovkin is slow, flat footed, and all that type of stuff.
Which is bullshit. Yep.
I really don't,
Yep.
kind of like talk about that in reference to what Golovkin does. It's just more about like his resume, like I said, when I compared him to a Vladimir Klitschko or like a Roy Jones, in that what is it? What fight does he have that makes him stand out? That has him be separated from like these other fighters. They're not particularly in the middleweight division, but as far as like all time. And I think for some fans of Gennady Golovkin, they feel like that first fight against Canelo Alvarez would have been that defining fight for him, because in that particular instance, it wouldn't have mattered if he would have still not been the undisputed champion at middleweight. He would have had that win over Canelo Alvarez, and that could have like catapulted him to wherever he could have been to. So that's pretty much what it is there for Golovkin fans and things like that. But we'll see, what he ends up doing here after, like I said, he had his win over Ryota Murata. And like you said, I mean, maybe he does need to hang it up. Maybe the guarantee for fighting Canelo might not be, enticing enough.
I don't want to
Um,
see him fight Canelo, to be honest, but yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to. I don't really want to see the fight. I wasn't. I'm not really much of a fan of. Wasn't much of a fan of those two fights anyway. And that was what, shoot, 4 or 5 years ago since those fights
Yeah,
happened.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and like you said, I mean, if Golovkin doesn't face the likes of Demetrius Andrade or someone there in the middleweight division that's at the top, then he could try to hang up the gloves. But I guess if he feels like he wants to have that one fight against Canelo Alvarez and it be the defining fight for him, to say that, hey, he could get a win over Canelo Alvarez, and particularly if he does get a win over Canelo Alvarez at super middleweight, he could be the undisputed super middleweight champion. And in that particular instance, that would just, really solidify his career right there if he's able to do that. So that would probably be the only thing there for him as far as like legacy is concerned. Is that one he would finally have that win over Canelo Alvarez. You know how like Juan Manuel Marquez had the win over Manny Pacquiao, but in
Yeah,
this particular instance, it would be for the undisputed super middleweight championship.
yeah, I've got you. I've
Yeah.
got you.
So that's pretty much the thing there with this discussion. Uh
Well, just
yeah,
back over
man,
to me. Back over to me, Junior.
hold
You
on.
know,
It's two, wasn't
we
them
can end
man,
it, but
them two fights. Yeah, man.
uh,
Yo. Remember, hey, this is the boxing source. And the boxing source is basically a podcast. And like I say, according to reports, it is the longest running boxing podcast out there, right? And I'm telling you, I'm gonna if we go through the archives, you'll see that I ain't really been much. I wasn't really much of a fan of either one of them fights. Yeah, I
well,
ain't
Junior, listen. It absolutely brilliant. As I've said to me, one of my boys, Jamil Parker, who's been smashing his thing right now,
yeah.
smashing his thing, and I was supporting him doing his thing. I subscribe to Jamil Parker if you guys are listening. Um, but you, Junior, you're an amazing guy. I mean, I've just been listening to you. You broke it down, and I was like, listening to you. You broke it down. You're an amazing boxing fan. You've got the likability to you. And I look at these guys in YouTube, by the way, and like I said to Jamil as well, that all these guys that are smashing it on YouTube and everything else, are they better than you? No, I don't think so. I think so. Your knowledge, by the way, Junior, is amazing, real good. And what I said, which said to Jamil, where Terrell Brown, and I'm bringing you guys into it because I know you're all, very close. You know, you're not Terrell Brown. Sometimes comes a bit biased and stuff, but you've got to be unbiased. But your knowledge is second to none. I mean, you've just reeled off stuff that I wouldn't have known. I would not have known. I would not have known. And I could sit right now and listen to you talk about fights and boxing. I was just sat there thinking
Hmm.
it's my go, but I could just listen to it. But honestly, man, you brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And why you're not making well, I'm not saying you're not making it big because you should do because there's a lot of guys out there that are not at like your level. They are they are just people like blue blood, blue balls, whatever you call them. They just want to troll, what just want to do things that just want to attract people for the hate. They ain't at your level. They are not at yours, Jamil's and Terrell's level. They're not. They're not, man. And it pisses me off that people like you should be smashing it. Because talking to you right now, you've educated me on a lot of things. You've
Well, I
educated me. I
mean,
mean, I can come into this thinking I know a lot about boxing, which I do, but you know more than me, and you
mhm.
educate me. You know,
But I mean, thanks for those props and everything like that. I try to be a student of the sport, and be a historian of the sport. But I mean, I'm like a historian in general, so I just try to do research on anything, and while being in covering the sport of boxing, that's what I try to do. Um, to be honest, this type of thing here with the boxing source movement, this is like tertiary to me. Not like a primary thing I do, not even a secondary thing I do, but this is like something after that. But it's something when you're a fan of the sport, and then you say, "Hey, I could be a fan of the sport, or I could cover the sport." and I just transition over to that and just try to do it in a in a more try to do it as honest and as straightforward as possible. But that's the thing. Like everybody's going to be biased. I'm going to be a fan of some fighters. I'm not going to be a fan of some other fighters. So I'm trying to be straight up with that. And while I've done the whole thing with the podcast stuff for 6 years or something like that, but me trying to be as straightforward as possible has been a takeaway in this YouTube or boxing type of thing anyway. Because
Yep.
if you're
Yep.
if you're not like a fan of if you're not talking about Canelo Alvarez every single day, if you're not talking about Bud Crawford every single day, if you're not talking about Gennady Golovkin every single day, Deontay Wilder every single day, or anything like that, then most of the times you're not really going to, have that type of popularity,
Yeah.
But that's not what boxing is. Boxing is one of the most, spread out sports ever. It's a world sport, number one. So you can't really concentrate on one particular country, whether it's US, UK, or whatever. It's a world sport. That's number one. And number two is this: you could have access, and this is something that actually Dimitri Salita talked to me about, a couple of days earlier. That
Yeah.
it's the most you can have access to a whole lot of these fighters. That's very easy. You could just talk to them. You can go to a gym, go to the gym where they're at. Depending on what they're doing or where they're at, you could go up to them, interact with them, all that type of stuff. And I'm just trying to bring that to the fans of the sport of boxing and
Yeah.
give them that type of look. You know what I mean? He looks like he had to go out there a little bit, but that's something there that I'm trying to bring to the people. And what I do as far as like reporting is concerned for those that are here. I basically started off just writing things. All right, let me see. He back.
Yeah. I'm back.
You know, I basically, started off doing, sports, writing for an independent sports company, doing photography, that type of thing, and then branched off of that to do my own thing for focusing on boxing, and I've been doing it ever since, and um, within a month from now, it will be 7 years, 7 years that I've
7
done,
years. Really?
7 years since I've done the
Wow.
podcast, since I've done the weekly podcast, 7 years. Um,
Wow.
yeah, like the first one was basically that day after or the week after Mayweather versus Pacquiao. That's when I first started
Wow.
the
It's about
podcast.
2015, 16. Yeah.
Yeah, 15. That's why I say, according to reports, it is the longest running boxing podcast that's out there. You could talk about the whole thing with Akim Barak. You could talk about
Wow.
those other stuff with that's on not iHeartRadio, but like these other podcasts that are out there. It could be the Zone Boxing Show. It could be others there with a few of these other guys that do their thing. But yeah, I've been doing it for that long. And it's just something that I just love to do. And as long as you love to do it, it really doesn't feel like work that much. You know what I mean? So that's how I'm doing it, building the way up. And like I said, it's pretty much gotten me to, covering big events. The biggest event I've covered up to this point was Crawford versus Porter last year. So, that's one thing. But, like I said, even with a lot of the stuff that I do here with this covers of boxing, I try to, teach people and bring people along the way. So, um, and that's something that Jamil will, kind of like tell folks sometimes is that, you know, he was in there. He didn't really know what to do. I showed him the ropes a little bit, but now he's, off there. He's taking off. You know what I'm saying? Why
He's
is some,
smashing it. He's smashing it.
yeah,
Smashing it.
passion, you know. So, for me, it's just about talking about the sport of boxing and trying to cover the sport of boxing in any way possible, or whatever method that people could just be able to access it and talk about it and that type of stuff. I mean, yeah, there'll be controversial topics all across the board, but I try to stay away from all of that. unless if it's something that I just can't avoid. Because really, I really don't want to just have my page be like that. Not really, So there's that.
And that's the thing. If you want to take it, these guys do it and be controversial about stuff. But that's why the real boxing fans really fuck with you and Jamil, because you take it to the level of what we us fans want to hear. You're not biased. You aren't a fanboy. You just talk to us on the level that we want to hear. And that's how it should be. And for you, Junior, you've been, like I said, I know a lot about boxing, but looking at you, I respect everything you do. You know more than me, and I think the general fans realise that you know more than us.
You know, it's just pretty much like, yeah, it just breaks down to that. It's just like I said, man. I just try to be the student of the game. Try to hit the gym sometimes, and check out the fighters, and then also watch a lot of fights. So that's basically what I'm doing. Pretty much on that note, we got some more fights that are coming up here tonight. So we got
Yeah, we
Ryan
have.
Garcia versus Emmanuel Tago, and we got Erickson Lubin versus Sebastian Fedor with that co-featured bout of Tony Superbad Harrison versus Sergio Garcia. So there's a lot of action for people to watch. We're gonna get ready to get on all that. I'm not doing a live during those fights, but I think we got something with a podcast or a thing there with the Rise podcast that features the trainer of Gervonta Tank Davis, or the trainers of Gervonta Tank Davis, Coach Calvin Ford, Coach Kenny, and also you got Coach
Wow.
Squeeze are there, Tyrone, and also Senior, who kind of like heads the whole thing with the Rise podcast. I think they're going to be doing a live during the fights for Erickson Lubin versus Sebastian Fedora. So y'all
Yeah,
go on the Rise podcast. They'll be broadcasting here in about
brilliant.
30 minutes or so. So y'all check that out if you can. But for me, I gotta get some grub. I think you gotta get some rest or something like that.
I
You
have
know,
done, but just before I go, I'm just going to
yeah.
say I'm taking Sergio Garcia to win decision and Lubin to win by decision. So take those, see what goes, put your money on it. That's why I see it. I've got a big run of winning at the moment, but Sergio Garcia, Erickson Lubin, both winning by points. Go check it out, man. Get your double on that one. Get your money on and win. But
Gotcha. So
thank you, Junior. Amazing. You've done fantastic. I'll always support you, man. Brilliant talking to you.
all right, no doubt, man. Thank you very much, there, C Dub. We appreciate the support as always, and yeah, we'll definitely do more of these discussions here or later on down the line. Whenever we can. So once we do that, then we'll just strike it up, and then we'll be able to chop it up.
Peace, man. You take care, brother.
All right, and that's it from us. Y'all enjoy the fights tonight. All right, peace out.